What if a few intentional moments of gratitude each day could help you feel more connected, energized, and sustained in your teaching life? Well, in this episode, I speak with Dr. Allyson Power about how gratitude practices can help world language teachers reconnect with what they enjoy most about teaching. Drawing on her doctoral research and years in the classroom, Dr. Power shares practical insights on teacher well-being and resilience, while also creating space for reflection, connection, and renewed energy in our schools and our classrooms. So, let's jump in. Whether you're planning your first lesson or celebrating your 20th year in the language classroom, I understand exactly where you are. I'm Joshua Cabral, and I'm also a language teacher in my 29th year of teaching. Now, I also have the opportunity to support schools and teachers all across the country who are working towards increasing proficiency and building confidence in their students. This is the World Language Classroom Podcast, with over 200 episodes of practical strategies tested in real classrooms just like yours and mine. So let's jump in. Vamos, allons-y. Hello, my friends. Bonjour, mes amis. Hola, mis amigos. Welcome to the World Language Classroom Podcast. I am Joshua Cabral, and you know I always start by reminding you that you are an incredible language teacher, an incredible educator, because you are being introspective about your teaching. You're listening to a podcast about language teaching, so that just tells me right away that you are truly invested and want to do what's best for you and your students. This is a perfect segue into what we're going to be talking about today, about how you are treating yourself and how you are interacting with your students. So we're really going to be talking about how to make teaching feel really sustainable again. And I say the again is because sometimes we need to stop and think about what we're doing and find and rekindle that joy and find that. And so that's really what we're going to be talking about today, is making teaching sustainable for us. And for me, always keeping that joy and that spark. And so this conversation today is going to be with Dr. Allyson Power. Now, Dr. Power has spent 22 years teaching middle and high school Spanish in Connecticut, and she's currently a teacher in the classroom and is also the department chair at Ridgefield High School. She's really passionate about teacher well-being, so great to have her here to talk about well-being. And she's really committed to helping schools become places where both students and educators feel connected and supported and energized. Now, she's presented at state and regional world language conferences, and she really dives into proficiency-based practices, and she's also worked with the Teacher Leader Fellowship Academy, where she has led sessions focused on bringing more joy into the work of teaching and learning. Now, the Teacher Leader Fellowship Academy, this is a year-long fellowship at the Southern Connecticut State University, and this helps teachers grow as leaders, to inspire change and strengthen school communities, all while remaining in the classroom. That's the piece that I love. So she recently completed her dissertation, and as we were talking about this in our emails, and I just checked in with her, she was not saying doctor in her emails, and then I just happened to see that this week she started using doctor, and so as of this weekend, she has defended her dissertation on this very topic today, and her dissertation was focused on gratitude as a sustainability practice. And she's looking at how caring for adults in world language programs directly supports effective instruction and student proficiency. So you're going to get a lot of takeaways right from the source here with Dr. Allyson Power. I hope I got it all in there because this is going to be a great conversation, and I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I'm so excited to be here and to talk about gratitude.
Okay. Well, gratitude. Thank you. We're going to be saying that a lot to each other, and hopefully our listeners are going to pull that out of here. And so I would like to start by just really diving into what drew you to this topic of gratitude as the focus for your dissertation. Now, especially when we're looking at world language teachers and as a department chair. So what were you seeing where you said, oh, this is something that I can really dive into?
Yeah, I think you said it. I have a really unique position where I'm a teacher, but also the department chair. And so as a teacher, with my teacher hat on, I know how challenging it is to get it all done and to maintain that work-life balance. In our field, we're being asked to do more than ever as we create proficiency-based experiences. We are finding and vetting resources. We are rethinking assessments. It's really meaningful work, but it's a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And as a department chair, I was supporting teachers as their needs continued to grow. And, our field has been experiencing teacher shortages for years. And since COVID, that turnover has only intensified. So I think I noticed that teachers were losing that sense of joy. Even the most passionate and effective educators, myself included, we were all kind of stretched thin. And that tension was really what I wanted to explore is how do people love their work so deeply and at the same time feel so incredibly exhausted? Mm-hmm. That's what I really wanted to better understand. And that's what led me to gratitude.
So it comes back to this idea of sustainability, and you mentioned the teacher shortage, and a lot of that comes from it not feeling sustainable or not actually being sustainable in the classroom. And so you wanted to find a way to keep teachers in the classroom and for it to be sustainable. And as you were mentioning that, you said that the needs of your teachers in your department continue to grow. And when you say those needs that you were seeing, how is that manifesting itself?
Teaching is very different from when I first started 22 years ago. I was handed a textbook, follow along. And now it's so much more interactive. We're turning things over to students in a way that we weren't before. And just to maintain the target language for 90% of the time is exhausting. And so I think world language teaching has really changed and really evolved in some great ways, but it's requiring a lot more from educators and a lot more time on top of the demands that we all have, right? Getting the plans in, getting the grades in, all of those, duties that every teacher has on top of the world language component. I think all of those things coming together really provide challenges to us. And definitely post-COVID, students are different. Students have changed. And so we're always trying to keep in mind that we want to hook them and get them engaged, but, their needs have changed as well, too. So I think it's all three of those things.
Mm-hmm. So I always think of this word stamina when it comes to our classroom, right? And so when we say, 90% plus, and when I coach teachers about using the target language in the classroom, and they'll say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to go in and it's going to be 90 to 100% starting tomorrow. And if it's not something you have done, you will be exhausted because it takes a lot of stamina, not just for you as the teacher to make all that input comprehensible, but for the students listening, it takes a lot of stamina. So that in itself is the idea of sustainability right there. So as you got into your study, what assumptions or what was your hypothesis going into this? I guess if you're going to write your dissertation, you have to start with a hypothesis and had some sort of assumptions. So what did you expect to get out of this study? What did you expect to learn, provide? What were your expectations going into this?
So I was doing a lot of research on positive psychology and on gratitude, and I was reading all the health benefits of gratitude. It reduces anxiety, can improve your sleep, lower blood pressure. And so I was really excited about seeing the possibility of how this might actually have some real health benefits for teachers. Gratitude works by just training attention. So there was no cost, no complicated training. My thinking was if teachers had a simple, intentional routine that they could apply, that it might produce some small but meaningful shifts in their mood, in their stress, in their perspective. And I just really hoped it would help teachers to be more present in the classroom. That expectation was confirmed. Findings suggest that gratitude journaling supported those small yet meaningful increases in positive emotion. And a lot of the feedback that I got, teachers described feeling more present, more connected, calmer, and grounded.
So I was not anticipating the health benefits. I was thinking psychological benefits. And you mentioned, I guess that along with our psychological benefits come those health benefits as well. And before we kind of dive into exactly what your study looked like, which you just alluded to with the gratitude journaling a little bit, what led you to even take that approach in the first place? Was it rather than having positive conversations about your teaching? What was it that led you down the path of journaling as a way to go about this?
When I was researching positive psychology and gratitude in general, I came across several seminal studies that tried the gratitude journaling. And it seemed like a really simple way that I could get teachers hooked. And it was something tangible. They could put it in their phone if they wanted to use the notes app. They could put it on paper if they wanted to. It seemed like a tangible way to harness this. And I was really trying to be careful of what I was asking of teachers. I didn't want it to be one more thing. And I worried that something a little bit more nebulous might be challenging a conversation or, take time for this, that teachers would say, I need you to tell me exactly what to do and how to do it. Because teachers want to do the right thing. They want to do a good job. But often they just don't have, like we said, the stamina. They don't have the time or the energy to really think it through. So I thought the journaling was structured enough and yet open enough to let teachers really experience it as much or as little, as deeply or as superficially as they could.
So let's talk about what that process actually looked like. So now that we're into the study, and we'll talk a little later about how you found the teachers and what they're doing now, but what were they actually doing and how were you gathering data during this study?
So I worked with 24 world language teachers across Connecticut, so all different districts, and they participated in an 8-week gratitude journaling intervention. So each week I sent out an email, and in that email was a short prompt around one of the 4 A's of gratitude. So again, as we just said, I didn't want to just say, be grateful, kind of speak in generality. So I had done some research and I came across this idea of the 4 A's of gratitude, thinking about different nuances of gratitude. So they are attention, giving attention, acknowledgement, acknowledging people who have helped you on your path, appreciation, really sitting in the gratitude and savoring it, and then action, doing something about it, maybe saying thank you or writing a thank you card. So I used a mixed method approach. Quantitatively, teachers did a gratitude questionnaire before and after the study. And then each week I sent out a Google form for teachers to just mark off if they participated or not. And then for qualitative, teachers on a Google form just gave me any feedback that they wanted. I didn't ask for the journaling, which I thought was important. I wanted to keep that kind of sacred. But I did say, if there's anything you want to share, please feel free. How's the routine going? When are you doing it? How are you doing it? On the phone, early in the morning, that sort of thing. And so I just kind of left it open and collected their feedback as it came in. I think I really wanted to understand what teachers were experiencing in their own words. So again, giving them enough structure, but keeping it open-ended enough was important.
Can you give us an example of the pre and post with the questionnaire where you saw the impact of it? So what sort of question were they answering and how were they answering it? And how did you see it as different throughout the process?
So they were answering questions about how much they felt grateful for things, for people, how much time went by in between feeling grateful, that sort of thing. And when I broke down the questions, I looked at pre and post in general, and those scores improved for the group. But what I was most interested in was the 2 questions that had the greatest growth were, one, what people were grateful for. So pre to post, they felt more grateful, which was exciting that they were, noticing more and paying more attention to those good things. And then the amount of time that was going between when they were feeling grateful, that went down. And so that was exciting to see as well, that they were not only feeling more grateful in general, but less time was going by in between not feeling grateful.
These prompts that you were giving them that were in these 4A categories, can you give us 1 or 2 examples of what those prompts look like that were in these categories of attention and acknowledgement and appreciation and action?
Sure. So I'll jump to acknowledgement. This was the one category that really stood out when I asked for feedback at the end of the study. Teachers really connected with this one. They really felt that there were people in their personal life and in their professional life, teachers, partners, colleagues, students, that really helped them get to where they were. And so for this week, I always gave a little opener. This week we're going to be working on acknowledgement, kind of laid it out for them. And then I would say something like, imagine this. Who made your day a little easier this morning, getting out of the house or making those copies, right? Who is that person that helped you out? The custodian that stayed a little later to help you out, right? Those kind of unsung heroes I would describe. And I would kind of say, think about this or consider this. And then I would leave it open-ended again so that teachers could kind of free flow a little bit. I would set the stage, let them know what the week's topic was or the week's category was, give them a little something to spark their interest or get them thinking, and then kind of leave it open-ended for them.
And so it comes down to this idea of noticing. Like there are these positive things there, and then whatever's getting in our way, which is totally legitimate and realistic. I don't want to discredit the reality of that, but it was taking a moment away from that to only focus on looking for those positive things to be grateful for. And that in itself, as I'm thinking of this, if I just take a second once in a while to take away the negativity or anything that's bringing in there, and what are those positive things? And so getting that weekly email from you where you're telling me I need to focus on that, just that idea of thinking of that right now is making me feel more positive. As you were saying those, I was like, oh, let me think about, I remember today I walked in to make a photocopy and a teacher was about to go in. She saw that I had one thing and she had 10. And she said, you know what, go ahead and do yours because I don't have a class right now. I would not have looked at that as a moment of, oh my gosh, I'm so happy. But when you put it in that perspective, I was like, wow, that was a good thing that happened today. Had she not done that and I didn't get my copy and I wouldn't have been able to do what I wanted with my class, and it would have, so that is true. That I was just thinking about my own day with that one prompt.
Yeah. And that was a really surprising finding, was that I assumed that if I asked teachers to think about the good stuff, that there would be more positive emotion and more gratitude. But something that we found is that teachers who participated even inconsistently still showed progress, still showed a benefit. So exactly what you just said. I had some participants that wrote back and said, I had no time for the journaling, but the email you sent me, that little reminder before I got out of the car and went in the building, I took a minute, and that helped. So even that sporadic participation was still enough to still have teachers progressing.
And I think that what can happen in workplaces and some school environments is you have what is this toxic environment, negative toxic environment. And it's sort of, in the teacher's lounge or wherever those places are. And those seem to be easy to find. You can get yourselves easily into those conversations. And so it's just, okay, maybe avoid those conversations and do something positive and try to find something positive there. So I'm loving this. So this is totally my jam. I'm enjoying this conversation very much. So let's dive a little more into what you were seeing as you were going through this process with teachers. From what you saw in the journals, why do you think that those moments of noticing seem to matter so much for teachers in their day-to-day well-being, but not just their well-being, but in their resilience? So as a researcher and having done all of this and gathered all this data, you needed to find something with it, right? So we talked about the data. So then what did you conclude about the science behind what was happening?
Yeah, when stress is constant, it's really easy to overlook the good stuff, as we were just saying, or those positive interactions. And so intentionally noticing them and holding on to them over time, teachers shifted their focus. They shifted that perspective for it just sitting in what was perhaps going wrong to what was going right. And that I saw over time switched into a sense of control, a sense of perspective, that purpose, reminding teachers that in all the crazy and all the stress, there is some really great things. What was most surprising to me, I think, is that I figured if I asked teachers to feel grateful or to consider what went well in their day, that they would feel good in that moment. But what was most surprising is that the small moments continued. And the journal showed that over time, teachers were feeling calmer in stressful moments, having more patience with students, approaching planning or instruction with renewed energy. So in some ways, the journal entries began to seem like buffers, stabilizers, recovery tools. And even a month after the study ended, many of the participants were still journaling and still feeling those benefits. I reached out to participants a month after and just said, anything you want to share? Are you still doing anything? Are you still feeling different? And many shared that, yes, they were still journaling. Even if they weren't journaling, several of them said they were just taking time to notice. And so I think that key takeaway is giving teachers permission to pause and appreciate over time. Those moments add up. And that's really what helps us to sustain that not only well-being, but that connection and the purpose in the classroom.
So that's interesting. Some of them did continue the actual journaling, but if they weren't physically pen to paper, finger to keyboard journaling, they were retrained to notice those moments, which
Exactly.
is really what we want. And I'm curious, first, I have lots of questions about this because I love research. So I was like, you want to talk about research? Let's talk about research. But the first one is in terms of how long their journal entries were. What did those look like?
It varied. I got them on a Google form and I put them into an Excel spreadsheet so that I could code them. And there were some that were just a sentence. And then there were others that were, sentences and sentences. And so I'm so grateful to the participants because that was one of the best parts of my week when I downloaded those and read through those. And I was reading, some people saying, man, open house was so tough this week. Or, I was sick this week and I was out. So I was doing double duty, lesson plans. But they were still finding those silver linings. And so whether it was short or long, I found it very impactful for myself to read the journals of others as well.
Anecdotally, so this probably wasn't part of your research, but in your conversations with the teachers that were involved, did they ever mention the idea of they were very focused on their teaching careers with these questions and these prompts? Did they anecdotally talk about how they may have used it in other areas of their lives that they learned through this process?
Absolutely. So I definitely got a lot of teachers talking about collaborating with other teachers down the hallway or students, a lot of anecdotes about school, but a lot of times partners that help them get out the door and allowed them to, be the busy teacher and have the things that they need to do. People talked about parents who believed in them and pushed them, mentors that encouraged them or kind of taught them the ropes. So there were a lot of incredible anecdotes about personal life that I found really inspiring as well.
So the last research-based question here is, I would love to know how you found these 24 teachers to participate. Were they willing participants? Did you have to cajole them into doing it? So who were these teachers and how did you connect with them?
I started in my own district, of course, and reached out to the teachers in my own home district, and I got 9 teachers there. And then from there, I actually had a contact at the state who put out a listserv email to anybody with world language certification, just offering this opportunity. And so it was really just serendipitous. They were volunteers, so they did sign up to do this. They were looking to get something out of this. And then from there, we just connected via email.
So there was, to some degree, they knew that this was going to be a study where they were going to be looking at gratitude.
They knew what they were getting into.
Yes. So it was a study about gratitude, and they were looking for tools and ways to be more sustainable. So it's not about this idea of, everybody that was involved was already having this great experience and they were just going to tell you how great it was. But there were actual teachers that wanted to learn from this experience. Is that sort of who got involved?
Exactly. So there were teachers who I gave them that brief description that you just gave. They volunteered, they chose to engage. And I think that made it more authentic because they were looking to improve. They were looking to find ways to feel better, to be more present, and to be in their positions longer.
Personally, I'm getting very I language with all this, but I personally sometimes get into this place of almost toxic positivity. We get into our realm of the toxic negativity and toxic environments, but there's also this idea of toxic positivity, which is sometimes positive to the detriment of really understanding the reality because of not wanting to recognize it sometimes. I don't know if that's the best way to explain it, but I think that some teachers are understandably a little skeptical of practices that can feel that they're forced positivity. Like you have to find the positive. You have to, do away with all of the negative. And they think, well, but the reality of my life is there is a lot of pressure and all these things going on. And so this sort of forced positivity. So how does this work avoid that sort of false positivity or toxic positivity to stay realistic for educators who really are under stress? Because I think there may be teachers listening that say, that's really great, but I didn't really have anything positive today to think about. And maybe it's because they haven't gone through the process of doing it weekly and have the prompts. But how do you sort of address the skeptic around this?
I was really nervous that teachers would see it as one more thing, which is what I didn't want. So from the start, I really tried to frame it as a reflective tool, not a mandate to feel grateful all the time. Teachers were encouraged to notice the small positives, but they also acknowledged stress, frustration, and fatigue. That came up in the journals as well. So teachers would say, I had a really rough week, but it would have been rougher if I hadn't journaled. Or, hey, I had open house last night and I'm looking back over my journal and I'm energized on this Friday when normally I would be depleted. And so it wasn't about denying the challenges or the stress that we face. It was just about creating space to notice and find what was working. I think that's what made it really kind of doable and honest.
And did you hear, again, anecdotally, from teachers that they maybe reread some of their previous journals? And what did they gain from that?
That's interesting that you ask that, because it actually did come up a couple of times where teachers said, I'm kind of flipping back in my physical journal and I'm just feeling joy and feeling the love. And sometimes we forget all the good things that are happening. And one participant said, there is just so much good. And somehow we let that get away sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Do you yourself, the researcher behind all of this, do you do the journaling yourself?
I do not actually journal. I did it during the intervention, and it was one of those things where I just couldn't do the physical piece of it. It became one more thing, and that's not what I wanted it to be. And so I've shifted my practice. I am a big fan of coming home and sitting in my car for a few minutes before I go into my house and take stock of my day. And I make sure that I don't go into my home thinking about all the things that I didn't do, but I'm celebrating just one or two things that went well. And I find that for myself, that's really achievable, sustainable, and uplifting.
Yeah. So what I'm pulling from that, and tell me if I'm misunderstanding this, but regardless of if it's in a journal, and granted during the study they had to do it in some way where you could gather data, right? But the real idea behind it is to just be intentional. So whether that's in a journal or that's sitting in your car on a regular basis and you have the routine of the time and place, it's about being intentional.
Being intentional and noticing the good.
How are you continuing to do your own work around this? You've done a whole dissertation, you've spent all your time with this. And so what are sort of your next steps to continue down this road with what you've learned, and you're continuing to support teachers in your own department and your own practice? What's next for you with that?
I'm so excited, having kind of come to the completion of this project. I'm so excited at this point just to kind of get the word out there that this is something low cost, low training, low time commitment. I think that's really exciting. I think teachers, they want to do a great job. And at times our job just feels very heavy. And so I'm just so excited to get the word out there that we found something that seems to be doable and honest. And so my plan is just to get the word out. Like, I'm here chatting with you. I hope to get the word out as much as possible in an effort to help teachers find different ways to notice the good and have sustainable, long careers.
If teachers want to reach out to you to learn more about what you're doing, or to connect, maybe get some hands on some of your prompts maybe that you sent out, how can we be reaching out to you?
Absolutely. So my email is apower@ridgefieldps.net. And you can also find me on Instagram at Professora Power.
Excellent. I will make sure those are in the show notes for sure. And as we finish our conversations, I always like to leave our listeners with a hearty piece of advice. So I would love some personal advice from you about how I can get started with this gratitude practice for my own personal sustainability.
Well, we said it before, I'm going to say it again. Change doesn't start by adding more. It starts with noticing what's already there. So I would recommend to everybody listening, take a moment in your day. Maybe it's before, the craze of the classroom begins, and that quiet moment when you're prepping your lesson, or maybe it's the end of the day like me sitting in the car. Find a moment and just notice what's working, because those small moments of intentional noticing, That's what's going to shift your perspective. It's going to help you feel more grounded, and it's going to sustain that energy and joy in the classroom.
Well, thank you very much for really bringing it all together at the end there and just noticing the good and being intentional about it. And we can sometimes be, unfortunately, very intentional about not noticing the good and focusing on the negativity. And again, not to dismiss the reality of it. I don't want to be sort of the toxic positivity, that we do have real situations in our lives. But there are those intentional places where we can notice the good. And I thank you very much for just simply making me realize that I had that incredibly kind experience at the photocopier today, that if I didn't intentionally stop to think about that, I wouldn't have counted that as a win for today. So thank you for bringing it even just to that level for me. So I really appreciate everything you brought here. I know that our listeners are thinking about this. They might be writing a journal, putting something in a notes app, or maybe they'll just sit in their car or they'll think about it. Whatever that is, hopefully our listeners are just going to be a little more intentional about finding the good. And that is all because Dr. Allyson Power came here today and showed us that we can do this routinely in our lives. So thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
What are your takeaways from that conversation with Dr. Allyson Power? I hope you're trying to figure out when and where you can carve out a little time to reflect on those moments of gratitude in your day. Be sure to check out the show notes to connect with Dr. Allyson Power. And I'll take my moment of gratitude right now and thank you for all that you do on a daily basis to support and motivate your students. I very much appreciate and enjoy supporting you and your language teacher colleagues as you bring effective, proficiency-focused strategies into your classroom. I will talk to you soon. Bye for now. Thank you for listening. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And let's stay connected on social media. You can find me at WL Classroom pretty much everywhere. You'll also find lots of ideas, suggestions, and resources on my website, WLClassroom.com. Now stay curious, keep learning, and continue the great work you do inspiring and supporting your students.